All right. Hey, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Cleaning Up Your Web Data Mess. Actually, let's be more specific there. Please, if you're feeling like it, if you're feeling chatty, please introduce yourself in the chat. And I know it's always nice to have a little bit of interaction. And also, while I go through this presentation, I don't have a assistant to help run this today. So if something comes to mind, a question you want to ask while I'm giving the presentation, please put it in the chat. I will get to it at the end. I'm planning to make this presentation 30 minutes and then save, 10, 15 minutes at the end of it for questions. Unfortunately, I can't moderate questions and talk at the same time, so just put the chat in there and I will definitely address it at the end. Cool. So yeah, welcome to Cleaning Up Your Website Data. I gave this presentation a couple weeks ago at a Drupal conference, and I was happy to have an opportunity to present it again to another audience. We had some good questions and feedback at that presentation, so hopefully this will go just as well. So I didn't do the alternate longer title for this is Cleaning Up Your Web Data, or basically the premise of this is how you all can learn from the mistakes of my clients so that you don't do the same thing. So I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about kind of the three big things that I see clients doing when I have audited their Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager setups, basically, and how you can avoid doing the same thing and creating those same issues. So very, I hope, practical, tangible advice here. Before we get started, like any free webinar from a consultant, I have to give you my little spiel. So my name's Emily Patterson, and I run a rather small digital agency that focuses on helping nonprofit and government clients with their data and research. So helping them use data and user research to create more effective marketing communications campaigns, better websites, run more effective advertising. So I basically do what I call the nerdy side of marketing. It's all the super data technical side of it. So if you need any help, please feel free to reach out. This audit that we're going to talk about today is really one of my main things that I do for clients. So if you're interested in learning more, my email address is there, and it's also at the end of this presentation. But that is the end of my marketing spiel, so you won't get any more. I promise. Cool. So here's a quick agenda of what we're covering in the next 30 minutes. First, I want to take a couple minutes to talk about what is an analytics audit anyway. I often get requests for audits, and I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding, or at least this is to talk about how I've sort of developed this over time, kind of what it includes, and a brief overview of what I look at in case you want to do your own analytics audit at your with your organization, or possibly hire me to do one. Then we're going to talk about the three main mistakes that I see clients make. The first is dirty data, don't care. So basically, there's definitely some fairly easy best practices that you can put into place with your Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager data to make sure that it's easy to use. Not caring about data quality, I think ultimately, I will stress this, makes any sort of analysis or reporting more complicated, and thus it makes you less likely to want to do it, and less likely for you all to be able to get your team and others who are less data inclined at your organization interested in using analytics to make decisions. So I think data quality is actually a really important issue, even though it seems maybe a little boring. The second mistake is more is more. This is maybe the biggest thing that I see is that people don't approach analytics with a clear strategy, and instead they just err on the side of just creating these sort of massively complicated accounts that track everything and have a whole bunch of different, I'll explain what I mean by properties in them. And again, I think this creates the same problem as the dirty data that when your account is so complicated and hard to use and hard to maintain, it makes you not want to use and maintain it. So it's actually like a turn off from you wanting to use analytics more in your like day-to-day work. And then the third mistake, I'm just coining it here, giving it to the intern. I think in a lot of organizations, maybe less so. This is something I saw more, 5 years ago when I initially started this than now. But that data, marketing communications data, can be an afterthought, and that it's something kind of easy to pass off to the intern, so that because nobody really owns it and no one's really thinking about strategy and permissions and documentation like you would for your main website or your social media presence, that this is places often don't have a good record of what's happened and kind of a good idea for what they want to do with this and how they can kind of harness the power of analytics, even though that sounds very dramatic. So giving it to the intern, basically shorthand for not really having a good owner and a good strategy in place, and some recommendations I have around that for analytics. Cool. All right, let's get started. First off is, what is an analytics audit? So like I said before, let me scoot back in a second here. Like I said before, I've been doing this for a little over 4 years now, and I've always been getting a lot of requests for analytics audits. And basically, this will happen when a new person perhaps will take over a digital team or marketing communications team. Perhaps there'll be a new initiative, like a new CEO or executive director push for the use of data for decision making in an organization. And all of a sudden there'll be a certain concern around, like, we have all of this data that we're collecting on the website, but we have no idea what this is tracking, whether it's set up correctly, whether the data is correct and accurate. Basically, we have lots of numbers and lots of data, but no clarity around what it is and really how to use it. So I put together this package for clients where I look at all of these different aspects of Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, and I answer some of these big questions for them and provide them recommendations for what they really should be doing with their analytics to ensure that all of these things are true, so that they have all the features turned on in Google Analytics. If you've ever been to any of my trainings, I talk a lot about like what you get out of the box with Google Analytics and what you need to turn on. So there's just a lot of stuff that you need to turn on. So making sure that all of that is activated, all their data is clean. There's a whole section about that, so we'll get more into that. Are you collecting all the data you need? For example, you say, you're really interested in, marketing. This is one thing that's come up just this week for one of my clients. Like, they're really interested in promoting one-time donors to become sustaining donors. This is a classic problem, but in order to, really target one-time donors, we need to be collecting data in Google Analytics about whether they are a one-time donor or a sustaining donor. Otherwise, how are we going to be able to connect that to like what's happening on our Facebook ads or our our Google AdWords campaigns, the campaigns that we're running? So it's basically, are you collecting all the data that you need in order to run the communications, fundraising, marketing campaigns that you want to? And then also staff training, making sure people are all set with the skills they need, and then also cleaning up just out of date and unused things. Because, basically we don't want to be collecting information about people. We're not actually using it for anything. We also don't want to make our accounts like super complicated if they don't need to be. All right, so what does that mean in practice? This is, in theory, all of the stuff I'm looking at. In practice, what I have is just like this long spreadsheet checklist that I go through and look at and put it together into a big report. All right, So first off, I was gonna say a big mistake that I see, and something that's really easy to fix, honestly, something probably you all could take care of right after this call in a couple of hours if you were so interested, is data cleanup. My story about this is that I am, especially now in COVID times, I do a lot of camping. And it used to be every time I would go camping, it was like a huge headache that we had all of our camping supplies, my husband and I, in our basement. And every time we would go, we'd have to make a checklist, and we'd go down there and we'd take our tent and our sleeping bags and our camp stove. We'd pack everything up and we'd drive to the campground. And then when we get to the campground, we would realize, like, oh man, we forgot the frying pan. Well, now, even though we have all this food, we can't cook any meals. So we'd have to go out to the store and buy a frying pan, because the alternative was like go out to eat and just throw all the food away. And like, that's not very good. So we would do this basically every time we would go on a camping trip. And the result was, of course, we ended up with extra frying pans, but also, like, I wouldn't really want to go on a camping trip because I would know, like, packing's going to be a big headache, and we're going to forget something, and then we're going to do an argument about it. Like the one time we forgot the tent poles, and it made me not inclined to want to go on camping trips. And I think the thing is the same with your Google Analytics data. Instead of going on a camping trip in this situation, you are instead doing an analysis project or doing like a regular monthly report. If your data is such a mess, just like our camping equipment used to be, every time you want to pull some information out of Google Analytics, every time you want to put together, your monthly report for your team, it's like a huge headache and multiple hours worth of exporting things and cleaning things up. So our solution for the camping equipment was basically, I have to mute something. Oh no, somebody's got a cough. All right, please go ahead and mute yourself, because it is hard for me to figure out how to mute you. And there we go. Run this at the same time. All right. So what we ended up doing was, putting all the camping equipment together into like nice Tupperwares. And now when we go camping, it's easy to pick it up and put it in the car. And that is the end of it. No more forgotten stuff. So I think it's best to take a similar approach with your Google Analytics data. Make sure that it is clean and packaged well in advance. And then when you need it, it won't be such a huge hassle to clean it up in order to do some basic analysis. So first off, what do I mean by messy data? Got some screenshots here, not naming any names, but if you might not recognize these, but you might be able to search in your data and see if you can see some similar trends. So this is a screenshot of query parameters, actually. So you can use, there's some settings in Google Analytics. You can just Google it if you want to find it. There you can strip these out, but if you don't set that up, what ends up happening is if you have data that is appended onto the ends of your URLs, it's going to make it very hard every time you want to pull just like the number of times a page has been viewed. If you don't take these parameters off the ends of the URLs, every time you want to pull the number of page views, you're going to have to go in here and search for all of the different instances of that URL and then add the numbers together. So it takes what is very simple task in Google Analytics and makes it, now it takes 5-10 minutes to do that instead of like 30 seconds. Here's another case. This is actually Google UTM parameters. I have a whole separate training about that. But yeah, if you're using Google campaign parameters or Google UTM parameters to track outreach, like your email or social media or SMS outreach campaigns and how many people click on those links to come back to your website, it's very important that you do this in a consistent manner, especially if you have a lot of people working on these campaigns. This is an old slide from when I used to work in-house at PBS and do trainings for them, where we were promoting Downton Abbey, and every single team was tagging Downton Abbey with a different name. So I made this word cloud about it. The thing is, like, obviously this was from 6 years ago, but the same thing holds true, and I still see clients doing it, that, you know, they might have everybody on their team is naming their campaign parameters in different ways, or perhaps one person is doing it and they just forget. So I think it's very important. This is not a setting that you can configure in analytics unlike the previous slide. It's very important to make sure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to how to name things. And they're using the exact same naming structure, because every time you want to pull a report on, okay, how much traffic did we get around this specific, you know, Downton Abbey campaign, I would have to add up all of these different campaign names in order to produce that. So it made what should be a simple task, you know, an ongoing analysis project. And then the last thing here is search data. So this is another thing in Google Analytics. You can put filters on your account to make sure that everything is lowercase. So all of your marketing data and all of your search data. And I recommend doing this because of this exact reason. This is the same deal. If the people who run this site want to know how many searches they're getting for pandas or whatever, you know, it becomes more difficult because they have to add the lowercase version and the uppercase version together. Google Analytics is case sensitive, so I recommend just using filters to force everything to be lowercase to avoid this problem. I realize you still have the problem here of masks and masks being plural and singular. Cool. So my tip around this, and I've pretty much already said this, is that I recommend going in the admin section. I think actually, here we go. I have a screenshot, and I will send everybody the link to this presentation so that you can pull up the slide and find this later. But here's where you can go in and block, where you can set up filters to make everything lowercase, to exclude that messy data on the ends of your URLs, to block spam, so that your data that you're getting in your account is as clean as possible. And I think, like I said before, having stuff in a nice format makes it easier to use and makes things that are keeps things that should be simple and not turn them into like major data cleanup projects. Just a quick warning that I always give when I show anything having to do with like the admin section of Google Analytics. Basically, to get to this, you just have to click on like this little gear icon. Is that to be very careful, especially with these filters here. Any filter that you put on your account, it will process your data going forward. So if you create a filter and then you accidentally made a mistake with it, unfortunately you won't be able to go back and fix it and get that data back. Whatever was filtered out will be filtered out forever. So unlike Marty McFly here, there is no time machine in the admin section. So just be very careful with whatever you are doing there. Mistake number 2 is a little bit more abstract, but it's basically, I like to call it more is more. So I think a lot of organizations take the approach that when they take this approach to setting up their analytics accounts. So they have a website and they set up analytics to track their website. Okay, cool. And then, okay, they get a YouTube channel and they find, or, maybe another third-party platform, and they find that, okay, well, we there's a plugin option for YouTube, so we're gonna install our tracking code in there. Okay, we'll track that too. Okay, wait, so we have a the HR team is running this intranet from McDonald's, and we're gonna put a the HR team wants analytics, so we're gonna create like another account, and we'll put analytics on the intranet and track that. Oh, and then there's a microsite around our conference. We're gonna track that too. And also, okay, we made another microsite for COVID-19 things. So we're gonna create yet another property in Google Analytics and track that too. All right, so we got like a lot of different stuff going on here. So what the problem with this, with creating all of these separate Google Analytics accounts or properties, is that if people come from your main site and then they go to your conference site, you're tracking those things totally separately. So you can't really see movement between them. It looks they're basically set up as two separate sites. So your data, and you're not going to be able to see if you sent someone to the main site with a marketing campaign and then they came over to the conference site and registered for the conference. You're not going to be able to see their entire visit. Here's how Google Analytics recommends that you set up your Google account, your Google Analytics accounts. First off, if you have your main website, that should be its own property. And if you are creating, another website that is separate from that, with a separate audience, that could be another separate property. To back up here for a second, is that your account, your Google Analytics account, should be at your organization level. So your one nonprofit should really only have one Google Analytics account. If you are an agency, you should be helping your clients set up accounts, their own separate accounts, and not putting them underneath an agency account, because that will limit their access that they can get. So you should have one account for your organization, and then underneath that, a property for each website or app. Okay. So for example, a real client example here is that if you, for a healthcare nonprofit, they have a main website, and then they have two websites that have separate audiences and separate domains. They have one for patients who have this particular condition, and then they have one for researchers who work on researching this condition. They are very different designs, different CMSs, different audiences, so they have different properties. All right, this is what unfortunately I see a lot when I do audits, is that there's a healthcare nonprofit, and instead of kind of trying to group everything together, they've just created properties for every single thing they can think of. So they have a main website, and they have it for patients and for researchers' websites, but then they also have one from their old site before they redesigned it. And they have like the HR platform has their own, their like job career portal has their own property. And then they have another one for their special subdomain that somebody created, and another one for their new COVID subdomain that they created. So there's just like a lot going on here. And that, every time, if they want at the end of the quarter to do a report and they wanted to know, okay, how many users have we gotten overall to our COVID site and our main site and our conference site? And the thing is, you actually can't tell, because if somebody is going to all three of them, they're being counted 3 times. So not only is this kind of a nightmare to maintain, because every time you need to update any tracking, you have to do it in all the places. It's also just hard to get accurate numbers because you're really like double counting people. So my cleanup tip is really think about how you can combine your stuff as much as possible. Just because somebody has a cool idea to create a new microsite or a new initiative does not mean that it needs to have its own Google Analytics account or property. I recommend trying to keep everything as much as possible on the same domain. Then also trying to keep everything as much as possible in the same property, because it's easier to separate data out in Google Analytics than it is to try and add things together, because ultimately if things are tracked as two separate sites, you can't really add them together very well. So if things are for the same audience, I recommend keeping that tracking together. If it's for different audiences, like the patients and the researchers, those are two different audiences and the traffic does not overlap, it's okay to make those two separate properties inside one account. All right, next tip here is about launching analytics for a new site. This is a question I get pretty often, and my main advice is do not set up a new Google Analytics account or property for your new website, your redesigned website, I should say. You just want to take, when you're launching your new site, you want to just migrate your analytics ID tracking from the old site to the new site and just start tracking the new site in the same property. Because if you move it to a new property, it's going to be really hard to see year over year, month to month, how the new site performance is comparing to the old site. Because basically, if you want to see how is January 2021 comparing to January 20, because this past year, because you launched your new site in May, every time you're going to do that, you're going to have to pull data from the old accounts. If you keep them all together, it'll be much easier. You can just see very easily year over year. So definitely recommend not making things more difficult and creating new stuff. Just keep it in the same property. Oh, here we go. Use the same Google Analytics ID. And you can I also recommend creating a property for your staging site, for your like QA dev site, so that while your site is still doing QA, checking links, checking all the images, you can actually go in and set up your analytics beforehand and then make it live right when you launch. Oh. All right, and then the last thing here is all about giving it to the intern. So I was thinking Google Analytics for web lives in kind of a weird space in between, your marketing communications team and your IT team. And I think often it kind of gets overlooked and no one really owns it. So what I've seen happen in some organizations is you get a new intern or you get a new, coordinator, and they come in, they're really eager, and they're like, the boss says, oh, here, you know what you can take over? Google Analytics. We need, someone to set up some goals, someone to do some reporting, and the intern, maybe they take it and run with it. But then when they leave at the end of the summer, no one knows what on earth they did. And they might be rather disconnected from like the real, the strategy of the organization. So then we end up with what I like to call a Google Analytics mystery. So this is really embarrassing to admit, but I am really into mysteries. I am like a big PBS, I know I already talked about PBS once in this presentation, PBS mystery fan. So I love a good old lady PBS mystery, a TV show. But what I do not love is a Google Analytics mystery. So actually when I was putting together this presentation, it got a bit delayed because I was in the middle of solving a Google Analytics mystery for a client. It was exactly this situation, though instead of the intern, their analytics had been passed off to a website vendor who set up all of this stuff but did not document it, and then they got a new website vendor. So they had all of this crazy stuff going on in their Google Tag Manager account and, didn't really know how to solve some issues that were coming up. So, not documenting things and giving things out, to people who are perhaps not super invested in the organization can kind of cause a lot of headaches. So how do you get around this? I feel like number one tip here, and this is less about things you can do and more about organizational strategy, but I highly recommend that you appoint someone on your marketing communications team to own your analytics account. So it doesn't even necessarily mean that, you can still outsource it to a contractor or your web team. But I think it's important that somebody who is very tied to the marketing team and communications team, like that side of things, is responsible for it. And I don't think it should be IT. Maybe this is controversial, but I think it should be like a digital marketing communications, like that sort of skill set should own this, because they understand maybe not like the technical side, but like how this data is used and like the strategy it needs to represent, and can kind of manage that. Don't, just because this is a weird task that falls in between marketing communications and IT, don't let it just like go to IT by default. Okay, sorry IT, hopefully you're not on the call. All right, and then the rest of the stuff is more practical tips. So I always recommend, this is like my new soapbox that I like to get on, is that you really think through access permissions when you, create when you are dealing with analytics, because what I've been seeing happen a lot lately is that somebody, same thing, like a vendor or a, someone on the team, maybe a junior person, created the account and then they left. They got a job or they were replaced by another vendor and they took the access with them. And then we have to spend all of this time tracking down the people to get access back to the account. So this is the way I recommend handling this. I recommend creating a generic Gmail address or Google account address, just like my organization analytics something at gmail.com, whatever. Make that the owner, make sure everyone has the permissions to that, because I don't think that we need to keep analytics like a secret thing. And then use that account to give staff and vendors access. And then another call out to agencies. So agencies, please, when you create a new website, a new website, a new analytics account, don't put it in your account. Make a new account for your clients with their own email address, so that they're not calling you 5 years down the line being like, oh, I need you to transfer ownership to that. This will enable them to handle everything on their own. So create a generic address and give people access with that. Then you can revoke it if they leave or whatever. The other thing here is to always document what's going on. I know this is obvious, but Google, I wanted to point out some places where Google provides really little easy features here for you to add your own documentation. This top one is in Google Analytics. There's a notes section right underneath like the line graph. And you can just add notes like, oh, added this goal, added this event tracking, added this filter, like we were talking before, and tag it to that date. And it'll stay on your account forever. So 6 months down the line, when you're wondering, hey, why did that drop on October 15th? Why are all these things different? You'll be able to see the star and go in there and see that note. So it's really easy. It doesn't have to live in some outside document. Okay. And then the other thing here is in Google Tag Manager. They have another section where you should definitely document any new tags that you're pushing live. All right, and then the last thing I have for this presentation is just some of the cleanup analytics mystery solving tools. So if you did do this and you gave this to your intern and they set up all sorts of stuff and now you don't know what it is. Unfortunately, not all is lost. Not all is lost. I have some tips for how you can look into this. Geez. Okay. Number one is Google Analytics real time. So I like to use this just as a really quick way to check that tracking is working, but also see like what is firing on the site. So if you have a bunch of events, conversions set up, you can go onto your site, then in another tab, open up your real-time window, and you can use your site, click on things, navigate around, and just look at yourself use it. So you can go here under this events in this real-time menu, or let's see, or the conversions or whatever, and look and see what's firing. Is it what you thought it was? Like when I click on this button and it tracks like button, is that really what's happening, or is it something totally different? So I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, so usually it's very easy to find myself in analytics. I just find the one person on the site. I just go to locations and find the one person on the site who's located in Charlottesville, Virginia. But if you live in a big metro area, this actually might be kind of hard to find yourself. So you can actually create another view in analytics and make it so that it's just filtering for your IP address. If you wanted to do the same thing, like if you live in Washington, D.C., and there's always like 50 people on your site in Washington, D.C., it's pretty handy and like just a super easy way to check what's happening and whether everything is working the way you thought it was. And then the other thing I use a lot is this Google Tag Assistant Chrome plugin. So this will tell you what tags are on a site. So if you are concerned that your site doesn't have Google Analytics running, or more likely has multiple instances of Google Analytics, or you don't have Tag Manager installed on all your pages, this Chrome plugin, Chrome extension is super helpful in helping to figure that out. So you install it and then you can enable it and also navigate around your site to see if everything's working the way you thought it was. All right, so that's all the material I have for today. I know it's a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure I leave enough time here, maybe 5 or 10 minutes to answer any questions. I see got a couple things in the chat. Cool. So let's see. I've been getting alerts to move to the new GA and urged to create a GA4 property. Can you tell us about GA4? So I think if this is the email that I've been getting with all of my clients, I'm not actually, I can't really speak to what is the difference with the current GA, because I was just interested in whether we need to migrate. I need to migrate everybody. But if you are using Google Tag Manager, which I highly recommend to run your Google Analytics code, you should be good to go. If you have your page view tracking tag running through Tag Manager, the upgrade will be handled for you automatically, so you won't need to make any changes. All right. Okay, we got another question here. Okay, so I want to learn some more about GTM and how to use that at my organization. Do you have any recommendations? So yes, I would say, so Google Tag Manager, I have one webinar that just kind of explains at a high level what Google Tag Manager is. But if you're looking to delve into it more broadly, I definitely recommend checking out an agency called Bounteous. They have a lot of really good content on their site. And another person to check out is a guy named Simo, S-I-M-O, Ahava. He is Finnish. He has a really excellent blog about Google Tag Manager and answering very specific questions that you might have about tag manager and getting that up and running on your site. Cool. Any other questions? Good. Okay. And I think one more question here. We have someone asked, I'm interested in combining my analytics properties into one account. Do you have any recommendations around that? So this was something that came up with a client I was just finishing an audit for, and they kind of were the client that inspired the example I gave at the beginning of the talk here, with all of the different properties all over the place. And honestly, I think you need to make it, if you merge two properties and you want to look back at historical data and see, okay, how is this performing in the previous year? It will be difficult because now your data will be in two separate places. So honestly, I told them that they, in the current case, they should just maybe keep them separate, and then going forward as they create new stuff, they should really combine it into the existing properties, because I do think that once this stuff is created, like cleaning it up can create maybe more of a mess. So it's important to think about just going forward, stop creating new stuff and start combining things. But yeah, if you do want to combine stuff, it can be very can interrupt, I think, what you're doing currently, because you'll have to be looking in two places to see the old data. All right. Okay. I mean, if that is everything everybody has, happy to take any other questions. Nope. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. It was great to have you all. And feel free, if you have anything else, if anything else comes up that you'd like to know after this, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to help give you my thoughts on anything. Cool. Great. Thanks.